Hi, it's Hartmut Günther here. I'm fortunate enough to facilitate the health and nutrition classes at a world-class recovery centre. And last week, it's April 2020, during the lockdown, we had a class where one of the young male participants gave a presentation on a key nutrient or an essential nutrient called thiamine. This is a recording of that presentation along with the slides, and I hope you enjoy it.
Thiamine is an integral part of the B complex spectrum of vitamins. Thiamine is primarily involved in energy metabolism, turning foods into usable energy source for the body, known as ATP, adenosine triphosphate.
That's right.
Thank you. All of the B vitamins work together to produce ATP, and each different vitamin is also involved in more specific aspects of the human body. Besides playing an important role in the metabolism of carbohydrates, fats, and protein, thiamine is also necessary to maintaining heart health. The human heart pumps blood in and out of its chambers numerous times a day, feeding blood through the vessels to various parts of the human body. Not only does thiamine help support a healthy working heart, it also helps promote healthy nerve function throughout the body. Although there are a number of diseases that affect nerve health, diabetics especially suffer from nerve damage. And if the disease is uncontrolled, resulting in numbing of the extremities, usually detected first as a tingling in the hands and or feet. Thiamine may be used to support overall nerve health, ultimately minimizing numbness and tingling and helping to protect against this condition. Like all of the B complex vitamins, the body requires a steady dose of thiamine each day to function at optimum levels because it is water soluble. Since thiamine is a water soluble vitamin, any excess that is taken in and not used by the body will simply be excreted in the urine, so toxicity is not a concern. Thiamine is found specifically in enriched grain products, dried bean, nuts and seeds, lean pork, and whole grains. It's important to be aware that drinking diuretics, such as alcohol, coffee, tea, or soda, can deplete thiamine levels, so it is important to drink those in moderation, or be sure to take extra thiamine. Thiamine is commonly added back to milk foods and marketed as enriching to prevent deficiency. Inadequate consumption of thiamine is the main cause of thiamine deficiency in developing countries. Thiamine deficiency is common in low-income populations whose diets are high in carbohydrate and low in thiamine, for example, milled or polished rice. Deficiency can have a negative effect on mood, including increased irritability and depression, as well as result in increased muscle fatigue. Alcoholism, which is associated with a low intake of thiamine among other nutrients, is the primary cause of thiamine deficiency in industrialized countries. Some of the non-alcoholic associated conditions include anorexia, gastrointestinal malignancies, which are cancers, and malabsorption syndromes, a condition that prevents absorption of nutrients through the small intestine. Severe deficiency results in a condition known as beriberi, resulting in nerve damage, muscle loss, loss of mental abilities, paralysis, and eventually death. Thank you.
That's it. That is awesome.
Yay!
Thank you.
Get out of the balloon.
Questions from the group? Anyone? Fire them at Dean. He's there to answer your questions.
Okay. So, grain, seed, lean pork, nuts are the only way you get thiamine, is it?
They are the main sources or the best sources of food to find them from, but you can also get it from, I believe, fish products as well, like salmon.
Yeah.
And yeah, those are the best ways to receive it, but you can get it through other foods as well. They're the main sources, specifically.
Okay.
What else you got?
Coffee and tea.
Yes.
How much do they deplete?
I don't know the level to which they deplete, but drinking anything excess, which is a diuretic, depletes the thiamine. So it's good if
Tea is a diuretic, is it?
diuretic, yeah.
Which means that your body doesn't.
Basically, a diuretic.
Fluid releases it.
Exactly. So you're releasing fluids quicker through your urine and your feces and through sweat, I believe. Is that right?
That's right. And even breath, sweat and breath, urine and feces. That's right. The word diuretic is typically, though, associated with urine. Diuretic meaning that something happens to the kidneys, it affects the kidneys, and the kidneys then don't reabsorb as much water. So therefore, you're peeing out a lot more. So diuretics typically relate more to the urine and the kidneys.
So you can never have too much.
Well, no, I actually looked this up because I was thinking that I was taking too much of it. I bought a supplement which has thiamine in it, and I'm also taking thiamine every morning. And when I took the supplement for the first time, I felt a bit woozy.
Yeah.
It doesn't have any toxic effects to you if you overdo it because your body would excrete it. Exactly. But you can get, if you have too much in your system at one time, you can feel nauseous, you can, throw up or have diarrhea.
Yeah.
There are things that are associated with too much in your system, but it can't be toxic.
That needs a little bit of tweaking there. But it's generally quite correct. And thank you for your anecdotal input there, Dean, about your own experience, because that's really interesting and really important as well. In the book that you've got there, my Food Synergy book, if you look up thiamine, I just can't remember if I've got it in there or not. If you go to the thiamine page, the first page that gives you the RDIs, there's a thing called upper level. Is there anything in that column for thiamine?
Upper limit.
Upper limit, that's it. Is it something there? Like value?
No, nothing.
Nothing. Okay,
Nothing.
That's what I thought. And so, so you were, let's put it this way, sort of correct in your. I'm just putting that. I'm just saying that to be politically correct as I can, because that's thiamine's the exception there, that they haven't established an upper level. What's the just you're on the page there? What's the RDI for people around our age, like guys, around 30 to 50 or something like that? What is it?
76.
76 what? Milligrams? What's that?
Oh, wait. What is it? Men 31 to 50, that's us. Sorry, the RDI. What does that say? 1.20.
1.20 milligrams?
Yes.
Okay, so this gets really interesting. So particularly when I'm about to show you the supplement, and probably, do you have the supplement you're taking, by the way, there with you, Dean?
I can get it. Do you want me to get it?
Well, either that, or do you know the level of thiamine in your supplement?
No, I can grab it from the nurse right now. Give me 2 secs.
No sweat. No sweat. We'll just wait for you. While you guys are there, who knows what an RDI means?
Recommend daily intake.
That's right, Graham. And what that, to translate what that means, Dean just read that out. I think he said 1.5 or 1.3 milligrams per day. In other words, that's that knowledge that we've acquired over the last 100 years. So not only have we established that thiamine is essential because of all the things Dean was just reading out, but we've also established per age group and per gender, because sometimes men need more of something or women need more of something, the amount that we need to have as sort of not just a minimum, but it's not really an optimal either. It's sort of a level that for a healthy person is enough, right?
So benefit.
What's that, Graham?
Better than 100 milligrams.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I take too.
Yeah. So
100 milligrams.
yeah, don't you find that interesting? Because that's nearly approximately 80 times higher than the RDI that Dean's just read out that we've just been talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the reason why they ramp that up and pump that up is for the two of the reasons that Dean was talking about. In the cohort, are we all here for alcohol, or are some of you here for drugs as well? Graham?
Yeah, both.
Just alcohol for me.
Yep. And Steve?
Alcohol.
Okay. All right. So it's relevant for all of us. Just to add a little bit to what Dean was saying about the tingling and the nerve damage and all that sort of stuff, the technical name for that is neuropathy or peripheral neuropathy. And as Dean was saying, it's very prevalent in diabetics because they have it, but extremely prevalent for long-term people who drink high doses or regular doses of alcohol beyond the level that's recommended. So as Dean was saying, if you're in the situation where you're drinking excessively, then it's almost guaranteed that you're not eating properly. And that's because of your lifestyle at that time. You're either not making the effort to do that or whatever. So that induces a thing called malnutrition, meaning that you will exclude certain foods and certain food groups and eat things you like based on convenience. And when you do that, you introduce a thing called malnutrition, and meaning that you're probably getting enough energy, and you can get enough energy by eating bread all day long, but you're not getting the nutrients or the full spectrum of the 28 nutrients, which I'll show you in a moment. So that's one thing. The other thing is an interesting thing, and I only more discovered this recently. There's also malabsorption, and Dean mentioned that as well. In other words, what causes malabsorption? Mal means lack of or inappropriate or incorrect. So if you're pouring alcohol down regularly every day and a lot during the day, well, then your ability, even if you ate a pristine diet that was designed by a nutritionist or a dietitian to give you all those nutrients, you'd still be struggling because the substance, in this case the substance is alcohol, is preventing you from being able to properly digest and absorb the nutrients. That's the second thing. The third thing is also particularly interesting in regards to alcohol, and that's why it's almost obligatory if you're checking into, say, a rehab, Freeman House, because of alcohol. I don't know if they do this with everyone, but nearly everyone I've spoken to there, they give you 100 milligrams of thiamine a day, and supposedly at least for a month. I'm going to tweak that a little bit in a moment, because what they realize is, in addition to those two things that will cause a thiamine deficiency, there's a third thing, and that is if you're drinking regular alcohol a lot, what happens is the metabolism. Metabolism just means what's happening in your body on a cellular level and an organ level, like your liver. So metabolism sort of chugs along pretty much. You obviously don't notice it unless something's really wrong and you get aches and pains here and there. But when you drink a substance like alcohol, or if you take even medications, or you have other medical procedures, or if you have a virus or something like that, your metabolism can change. And when your metabolism changes, it can cause an increased demand for a particular nutrient. In this case, because of the high consumption of alcohol, not only those two other things, but you need more thiamine to be able to metabolize the alcohol. I don't know if you know, but when you drink alcohol, alcohol doesn't stay in your body or bloodstream for long. If it did, you'd be dead. So there's a metabolic process where alcohol is converted to something else in your body quickly. In males, that enzyme that starts that process is actually in the stomach. So that metabolism, that changing of alcohol happens very quickly, and then it happens more in the small intestines. And then, of course, it happens significantly when the alcohol is absorbed into your bloodstream, and it happens in your liver as well. So those processes that are then instigated in your liver require high levels of thiamine to be able to convert, metabolize the alcohol. Just to put a perspective on what alcohol does, it kills things. Pure alcohol, ethanol. All the hand sanitizers around Freeman House are 70% alcohol. It's the only thing, apart from chlorine and bleach, pretty much, they know that kills viruses. That's pretty high level of something to kill a virus. But of course, it kills bacteria, and guess what? It kills our own cells as well. So, and as an evolutionary thing, the body has figured out how to metabolize it. So, they're the three things that I just wanted to put a bit more meat, so to speak, on what Dean was just talking about, into the reason why you need thiamine. Now, I presume, is this right, Dean, that you've chosen thiamine for that sort of reason, that it has a relevance to you guys there in regards to alcohol?
Yeah, well, to me personally, yeah, I'm taking it every day, so I thought that it would be good to get an understanding a little more of why, because I didn't know. I was just told to take it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. One of I actually mentioned this, I think, last week when I first started volunteering for Freeman House. A client came to me from Freeman House in my clinic, and I wasn't doing anything with Freeman House at that time, but she'd been through Freeman House. She was obviously been drinking heavily for several years. Just a youngish woman in her 30s with a family, and she unfortunately had been diagnosed then with a very serious form of peripheral neuropathy. So the peripheral neuropathy we've been talking about, and Dean's been mentioning, it's a tingling, those sort of uncomfortable sensations in your nerve endings, either in your arms or your legs or your body or wherever it might be, pretty much clears up once you stop drinking within a month, and particularly once you start taking thiamine. That's incredible. But for this lady, she'd been diagnosed with a thing called CIDP, which is a more advanced form of peripheral neuropathy. And according to the doctors, and they scared the crap out of her, they said that she's going to have this for the rest of her life. And she'll be debilitated and won't be able to, because she was in pain. I mean, a serious form of peripheral neuropathy leads to pain, and it's associated with pain. So she was distressed, and somehow she heard about me. I don't know how, and she ended up coming to see me, and so it was a learning exercise for both of us. But I'm telling you this story because it has a good ending, even though that the prognosis is a medical term meaning a prediction of what's going to happen to you, looking into the future, so to speak. So the prognosis for her was not good. But I don't listen to prognoses, particularly negative ones. I take them into account, of course, don't ignore them. But if you just accept some of these things, there's too much evidence and too much anecdotal reports that sometimes it doesn't actually play out that way, which is exactly what happened to this lady. So we changed her nutritional regime, of course, including the thiamine and all of that, but a more holistic approach to nutrition as well. And as Dean was correctly alluding to, or not alluding to, but talking about at the start of his talk, that thiamine doesn't work in isolation. Like, if all four of you were asked to clean up the yard outside at Freeman House, you would presumably talk to one another and figure out what to do and do different tasks and blah, blah, blah. Guess what? all these vitamins that we're talking about, that's exactly what happens in the body. They work as a team. They work synergistically with each other. So if you're malnourished, and this is what I'm going to get to in a moment, if you're malnourished, in other words, generally depleted in a whole range of things, you can take thiamine till the cows come home, and it'll have some beneficial effect for you, but it won't be optimal because you won't be getting the other nutrients, particularly the other ones that Dean mentioned there, B2, riboflavin, and B3, niacin, and some of the other Bs as well. They're all working together to produce that thing that Dean mentioned called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. ATP is a fancy name for money in the body, currency, energy currency. Like you put money in your bank, you also put money in the form of energy in your body via food. But because, if you can imagine, you're peeing and pooing that out within 24 hours, how the hell is the energy stored in your body so you can even get up the next day? And that energy is stored in the body via the thing called ATP. And it just sits there, millions of molecules in the cell after the food has been digested and waiting to be used as soon as you get up and get out of bed in the morning. In actual fact, it's used while you're sleeping as well. So all of that is just to sort of shine some more light on what Dean's talk, but also to impart a little bit more of a holistic perspective as well. Because the way our minds work, we like a quick fix. It would be convenient if you just took thiamine and all your problems were solved. Mentally, physically, emotionally. Well, as you can already glean from what I'm trying to say on the body, on the internal level, when I did biochemistry many years ago, I realized it's a window into the workings of the body inside on a cellular level, and I found that fascinating. It's sort of like discovering how life works inside of you, and it's not even medicine per se. It's just like, wow, this is what's going on in there, and it's just fascinating. So, questions, ask some things, talk amongst each other for a minute. Anything else that's come up while we've just been talking? Direct them at Dean.
Is there only the B vitamins that do that, or is the other vitamins combined with each other?
When you mean other vitamins, there are definitely other vitamins. What are you referring to? Anyone in particular?
Or okay, nutrients.
Yeah.
Is it only the vitamin Bs that work together, like you said, in the body?
Okay. All right.
Together?
Good question. Yeah. All right. I'll give, and I just want to say thanks again to Dean. Before I start talking, we run out of time though, and I'll answer that question, Michael, because it's basically what I'd had planned to talk about anyway. But do we have a brave soul to volunteer to give a presentation next week?
I'll do it. Okay.
Good on you, Graham. Would you like to? Dean just handed the baton to you there. That you can use those books to answer the questions, or you can go to the internet. You choose, or you can do both. It can be a 2-minute, 5-minute, 15-minute, 20-minute, half-an-hour presentation. You choose. There's no guidelines like that. The mere fact that you're going to show up and enlighten us on something. Have you got a particular nutrient in mind?
Yeah, well, we had, when you used to come here over a month ago,
Yeah.
Vitamin. I've already chosen one.
Yeah, which one was it?
Vitamin C.
That's it. I've got you written down here. Vitamin C next to Graham. Thank you. Awesome. That's great. Well, yeah, vitamin C is a good one. They're all good ones, but it has there's a lot of information there, and it's virtually the first discovered vitamin, discovered by an admiral in the sea. Anyway, I won't go into no spoilers. You do what you want to do, however you want to do it, and that's awesome. That's fantastic. All right, so then just for the little time remaining, again, just to provide some context and to try and answer Michael's question, I'm just going to share my screen and can everyone see that okay and read that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic. So these are a couple of little things, and normally this is a handout. I think Dean might have had that handout, but I'll just again put a bit of meat on what I've written here. So essential nutrients. Let me just jump. So just and sort of to reiterate what I was just saying before, even if one of these is very depleted or absent, the person gets very sick and can die. And this is what we're doing here in the class. And part of you giving a presentation, we're going around the group, helps us learn about these particular things and have a bit of fun as well. So we discuss and learn why we need them, because that's important. Where to get them from, also important. Factors increasing demand, and we've just spoken about thiamine is a classic example of like one of the factors that increase demand is obviously, as we've just discovered, consuming alcohol. There are other things as well. How much is enough? RDIs, recommended daily intakes. Safe eating, and this is where I introduce my own bias into the group or into the class. I'm a definite advocate for first principles and whole foods, meaning foods that have been minimally processed and hopefully not even at all, and hopefully bought locally from a grower's market or a food shop here in Amida, or wherever you're living. And also, again, my own bias is that switch your thinking, and this will not happen overnight. Consider the possibility of organic or biodynamic. And of course, you can't do that for everything all the time. And we, as part of working through all this, my job is to dispel some of the myths, but for instance, around eating organic food. And the two most common myths are it's too bloody expensive and where do I buy it? So both of those myths are easily debunked, but I'm not going to go into that right now. So we also talk about supplementing, and I've got a couple of things just to talk about that as well. Any questions?
Mm-hmm.
No. So for the other members of the group, Steve and Michael, later on, you might find one of these nutrients interesting, and you can pick a nutrient because you either have heard about it before and are interested in it, or you can pick a nutrient because you've never heard of it before. And both of those will make it an interesting learning exercise for yourself and for us. So I was talking a little bit before about metabolism. Now, unless you've read about that or done some learning around that, it's a pretty vague sort of term. So I'm just going to read this out and just fill it in with an analogy. A vitamin is a cofactor or assistant used in key metabolic activities in living organisms like humans, plants, bugs, and animals. So these things, metabolism happens in all of those things, including plants and bugs, and of course in animals as well. So we don't often, unless you're a farmer or have grown things a lot, you don't look at plants and think, oh my God, the incredibly complex things that are happening in there are just as complex as they happen inside of us. And that's called metabolism. Some of these metabolic activities involve long, complex production line systems, like making hormones like testosterone or estrogen, for instance, or even cholesterol, in which the vitamin is a key member on that production line. And I guess the analogy there that particularly I think most of us would relate to is, you know, the Henry Ford. He was the one who invented supposedly the production line, and they could spit out all those cars. And the reason why that works so successfully, the production line involved specific people at different points along the line doing very specific things. And if one person was missing or something went wrong somewhere along that line, the whole car would not work. It was faulty. So it's a very similar analogy in the body with all of these, like to make a red blood cell, to make hemoglobin, which is a very complex molecule. Hemoglobin is needed to carry oxygen around your blood. It's a long production line. And that production line is the key, let's just say in a car, the key ingredient is like steel. Obviously, there's other things too, like rubber and different things. But so in the human body, the key thing is the raw energy substrate that we get from food. And that is actually either carbohydrate that gets converted to glucose, or protein, or fat. And we'll talk more about those later. They're not in this category, but those things provide energy, and they're the raw substance that the production line has to work with. But the members of that on that production line are the vitamins and the minerals. So if all of a sudden you don't have enough potassium, first of all, you're in hospital, because potassium is an essential electrolyte. It's used for nerve conduction and muscle contraction, heart function, all that sort of stuff. The thing that will enable that process that enables the muscle to contract in the heart won't work properly. So that's serious. So that's just a serious example of just one nutrient. And Dean mentioned some of the things that stop working properly when there isn't enough thiamine. So this is an interesting concept with nutrition, and the body has evolved to live. It's extremely resilient, but at the same time also very fragile, meaning that you can still survive on if you're not getting enough of a certain nutrient, but you won't be thriving. That is for sure. And of course, if the level of the nutrient drops down too low, well, then serious things start happening. So that just gives you an example. If the vitamin is absent or reduced in number, then the whole production line grinds to a halt, and the host, that's us, suffers. Okay, so this is the other, apart from what I've just been talking about, we've been talking about the essentiality of these vitamins and minerals. This is the key concept. The body can't make these essential nutrients. We have to get them from food. Key point. So you don't eat, you don't get those nutrients. You don't eat the right foods, you don't get all the nutrients. You don't eat enough of the food, you don't get those nutrients. If you eat more bread mostly all day, you're certainly not going to get enough of the nutrients. For instance, I'm not just picking on bread, I mean, just some people just eat chips a lot. Well, then things are going to happen over a period of time. So, and that's not true for all animals. Like some animals, for instance, can make vitamin C. I think it's cats, can actually make that themselves in their own body, just like we can make hemoglobin, but we cannot make vitamin C. Can't do it. So you have to get it from food. And Graham will elucidate that and inform us about that next week in regards to vitamin C. Okay, so does that make sense? Any questions about that or any comments? Okay. Right, so these are what I was just showing you there, and that was what you were asking, Graham. Michael. You were asking, well, what are the other vitamins? So we sort of break them down. What's that?
I was asking you which vitamins coincide together to make them work better.
Okay.
All of them, is it?
Yeah. Well, the general answer to that is all of them, using the analogy of the production line system. So if one of the workers is sick and not there for the day, the whole production line's going to stop. So
Yeah.
the degree to which they work together varies, though. Some of them are more lone operators, and I guess you might say on the production line analogy, there might be some supervisors on the production line. They're not actually working hands-on on the line. So one of them's sick, maybe someone else can step in there or something like that. Whereas the fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin that you can see there at the moment, and we call them fat-soluble as opposed to water-soluble, and Dean was mentioning diuretics, and what the reason why they're called water-soluble is that they actually dissolve in water, and that these ones, it's not entirely true for all of them, but most of them, they're not really stored in your body. The exception there is vitamin B12, cobalamin, cyanocobalamin. But most of those are not stored, so you need to get them in every day. By the way, that's probably a fourth reason why you've got to take, and Dean was also alluding to that. In other words, there's no storage mechanism. So you've got to be getting it regularly. Yes, you can go for a few days or a week or whatever. The body adapts and does its thing. But these ones are passed through easily through urine, so you have to get them every day. Whereas these ones, fat soluble, and we have fat. We all have fat, whether you're fit, lean, or whatever. Even Dean there has fat. And it varies. Women traditionally have, on the average, around 25% body weight is fat. Men are more in the category of 15 to 20%. And of course, that varies according to how much exercise and different genetics and all that sort of stuff. So we all have fat. So some of these vitamins are stored either in your organs or in fat. And the other thing is these vitamins here, A, D, E, and K, not so much D, because D is sort of comes more directly from the sun, and it's made in the body from cholesterol. But the others need oil or fat in your food when you're eating them. So that was what makes them fat soluble. And usually the foods that contain these things have got oils and different things like that in it as well. So that's sort of fat soluble and water soluble. And yes, they work together. So again, Michael, these three top B1, B2, and B3, as Dean was mentioning and we were talking about, they definitely work together to produce the energy, the ATP, the energy currency in the body. Definitely. You can look at the pathway of that. I won't show you that right now because it's a bit mind-numbingly crazy. But and then the others like pyridoxine, vitamin B6 is involved in different things. Some of these things, and it's interesting in the body, and when we get to the minerals as well, they're not just involved in one thing. They're involved in either multiple things. Like I know for a fact, for instance, magnesium, which is one of the, which is on up the top here on the essential elements or minerals, is used in at least 200 of these metabolic pathways, these production lines. So there's hundreds in the Henry Ford factory. There might only be one or two production lines, and there's a certain car, a Chev or something that comes out the other end. In the body, I don't know exactly how many there are, but there's at least 1,000, probably more production lines. And so these nutrients are used in multiple production lines, not all the same either. Some of the nutrients are only used in a couple of production lines, like cobalamin and folate, for instance. Interesting nutrients. So hopefully in our classes and when we do the presentations, we'll learn more about these little babies as we go along. And obviously vitamin C is down the bottom there, and Graham's going to talk about that next week. So is that okay, Michael? That sort of answer your question?
Kind of my understanding of that is like water solubles, like most of them work all together, but the water soluble ones kind of favour each other, and the other ones are fat soluble, they work together in that way. Is that right or not?
Yes, sort of, but without sort of segregating them too much, because the body doesn't sort of think like that, because, and the reason I'm saying that, say for instance vitamin K is involved, and there's actually, and by the way, this is where it gets pretty bizarre too. There's not just one form of vitamin K. There's 8 forms of vitamin E, and we've only just discovered this more recently. And the bizarre thing, and the reason why it's just lumped under vitamin E, because they all have the similar structure, and in some ways they have similar properties, but they come from different foods and they have slightly different functions. So say that with the vitamin E, you'll get one form, alpha tocopherol, from almonds, but you'll get gamma tocopherol, which is another name for vitamin E, from walnuts. And those two have different functions. But to address what you were saying was that these don't function independently from the water-soluble vitamins. So you may have riboflavin working with vitamin K in its production line. Does that make sense? Yeah. Just so you didn't think in your mind that they're that exclusive. They don't hang out together, but they can, and they do.
Yeah.
And that includes the minerals as well. Absolutely includes the minerals. So vitamins are things that we call cofactors, and minerals are like cofactors, in other words. And sometimes it gets really interesting, because a lot of the real workers on the production line, just staying with that analogy, are what we call the enzymes in the body. Enzymes are either simple structures or complex structures that are the workers on the production line. And say there might be a worker at some point in the production line, but that worker, and let's just say he's an enzyme, needs 2 other workers. If those 2 other workers aren't there to help him with his little task, he can't do his task. And those 2 other workers might be magnesium and sodium, for instance, in that analogy.
Yeah, that's what I want.
Yeah. So the enzyme does the work, the main work, but all these vitamins, and it's a general thing, and these minerals are the cofactors or the helpers for the main workers, which are the enzymes within the body. And then you get multiple enzymes that form the whole production line, and at the end spits out testosterone or cholesterol or hemoglobin or muscle fiber, something like that. So right, there's one more little slide here, and this is sort of showing some more of the essential elements. Some of these you may have heard of, and some of these you may not have. And the reason these green dots next to the bottom ones there is because the evidence is contentious whether they're actually essential or not. So we're still, believe it or not, still trying to figure that out. With all of this talk that we're doing, even today, and all of this, it may create the illusion that we know a lot, we almost know everything about nutrition, but we don't. So there's a lot more to learn. It's useful to focus on things that we do know, because at least it gives us somewhere to start. Okay. Rightio. Anyone want to say anything or ask anything? Have you,
No,
Michael? You go. Oh, Graham, who's
no,
next?
I'm only going to time, so I'll leave it for next one, because I could ask questions all day about this.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's fantastic. I'm glad that you're stimulated. And what did you just say there, Graham?
Oh, there's a few of those elements, those trace elements.
Yeah.
Essential elements. They've got the names, like vanadium.
Yep.
I've heard it used in like chrome vanadium in hand tools, and then you got molybdenum, which is a component of grease.
What did you just say? Which one?
molybdenum.
Ah, yes,
Molybdenum.
yes, yep.
Yeah, molybdenum disulfide is present in some automotive greases.
That's right. That's right. So you're sort of alluding to the fact that why the hell are they on this list of nutrients for us?
Boron is, that kills ants, doesn't it? That's ant sand.
Can be. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So
some of these sound toxic, but
yeah, right. That is such a good point that you brought up, and you're absolutely right because, and we'll save this for next week as well. But I've had a couple of consultations in the last few weeks, and particularly an interesting one with vanadium. You mentioned vanadium, so vanadium plays some role in glucose metabolism in the body. And they've discovered that if you ramp up the level of metabolism, either as a supplement or a medication in someone's, and give it to someone, it has some, not in all, some beneficial effect in regards to insulin resistance and the diabetic outcomes for people. So it's interesting. But to what you were just saying, Graham, these things are definitely toxic as well. And that's why I asked Dean, was there an upper level published for thiamine? And there wasn't, meaning that they haven't figured that out yet. As far as they know, you could take a lot of thiamine. There is an actual, I remember reading the literature, there is an actual level where things start to go crazy. But that's a lot more relevant to these minerals. Like if you have too much magnesium or molybdenum, for instance, manganese, I should say, manganese or molybdenum, particularly cobalt as well, and boron, they have upper levels. And many of them have been established. And that's in that book that you've got there in front of you. You can look some of these up. Most of these are in that book. And you'll see that if they've figured out the upper levels, they'll publish that. Sometimes the upper level might be 100 times higher than the RDI. Sometimes it might be 10 times higher. But they're there, and if we know about it, that's definitely right. Yeah, so good point. And it is weird to think that these things are used as in industry, but you have to appreciate that whole list of these trace elements, and including these ones here, they're elements. They're just straight out of the earth. They're not like vitamins that have been made in plants. These are straight from the earth. And as such, they're used, I mean, we know that chromium, anyone, going back to the car analogy, chromium is definitely used in cars, shiny stuff. Yeah. So I just noticed I've got chromium on that list twice. Oops. But yeah, they're elements. So the earth has given them for us to use in industry. Probably didn't think of that, but also in regards to metabolism. And chromium is also, interestingly enough, coincidentally, also used to help control blood sugar levels. It's important for insulin function. So yeah, we'll have some fun. If there's no other questions, shall we leave that there for today?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, because thanks. I felt we really covered a lot. So it was a great introduction. So now we can just ease in and have some fun and learn about these things as we go along. And by the way, if you have some questions about health or anything related to in the clinic or medical sense, bring those in because we talk about those things sometimes as well.
Cool.
All right. See you on Wednesday for those of you who are coming to the mindfulness class. And yeah, take care. And
thanks, Art.
Thank you.
Right. See you guys.
Have a good day.
No worries. You too. And tell Dean thanks again for giving his presentation. It was awesome.
Will do. Yeah, we'll do that too, right?